When you think about the US and Iran, what comes to mind? Constant tension, right? It feels like it's always been this way, but it hasn't. And if we really want to understand the hostility that defines the relationship today, we've got to go back. We need to find the origin story, a single event decades ago that planted the seeds for everything that followed.
All right, to really get to the heart of all this, let's start with a puzzle. Picture this. It's 1980. The Iran hostage crisis is all over the news. A group of students has taken 52 Americans captive, and the whole world is watching. Now, you'd think their main demand would be for money or weapons or something tangible, but no. Their most persistent demand was an apology. An apology from the United States. How on earth does that make sense? The people holding the hostages were demanding an apology from the country whose citizens they'd captured.
I mean, to pretty much everyone on the outside, this seemed completely backwards. You're holding our people, and you want us to say sorry? For the students, this was clearly about something much deeper, a matter of national honor. But for President Jimmy Carter, no way. The idea was just unthinkable. He shut it down, flat out, saying the United States had absolutely nothing to apologize for. So what was this deep grievance? What did they believe the U.S. had done that was so bad it warranted an apology, even then?
Well, to answer that, we have to rewind the clock. Way, way back. Long before the 1979 revolution that everyone knows about. We're going to a time when Iran, which many people still called Persia back then, was sitting on this incredible wealth. But here's the catch. It wasn't really their own. The country's riches were effectively up for sale to the highest foreign bidder.
Yeah, this was the era of concessions. Basically, from the late 1800s into the early 1900s, Iran's rulers often needed quick cash, to fund their own lavish lifestyles. So they started signing these deals that handed over control of huge chunks of their country's economy to foreign interests. And the main customer? Great Britain.
And just look at this timeline. It shows you how systematic this sell-off was. In 1872, one deal basically sold the country's entire industrial potential to a British baron. Then came a monopoly on tobacco. That one actually sparked massive public protest. But the real game changer was the 1901 deal. It gave away the rights to all of Iran's undiscovered oil for pennies. And when that oil was struck, you better believe the British government itself swooped in and bought a controlling stake, making sure Iran's black gold would fuel the British Empire, not the Iranian people.
So you can imagine how this felt. For decades, Iranians just watched their nation's greatest asset get siphoned away, and they saw almost no benefit from it. That kind of thing builds up a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, and all that widespread anger eventually found a powerful voice in one man, a charismatic, Swiss-educated lawyer named Mohammad Mossadegh.
And if you want to see just how unequal this whole deal was, look at these numbers. They're just staggering. Between 1933 and 1950, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company and the British government combined took home nearly £340 million from Iran's oil. So what did Iran get in royalties, the country where the oil actually came from? Less than $100 million. Let that sink in. Britain was profiting nearly 3.5 times more from Iran's own resources than Iran itself.
But look, this wasn't just about money on a spreadsheet. It was about dignity. You had Iranian workers toiling in harsh conditions, living in slums, while their British managers enjoyed these luxurious compounds with exclusive clubs, pools, and tennis courts. There was a sense that they were treated as an inferior race. This kind of daily humiliation just poured gasoline on the fire of economic exploitation.
And this is where Mohammad Mossadegh's message became so incredibly powerful. He put voice to a simple, electrifying idea that resonated with millions. The oil belongs to the people of Iran. It was their national treasure, and its profits should be used to build a better future for them, not for some distant empire.
And so, in 1951, after being swept into the Prime Minister's office on this huge wave of popular support, he did it. He actually did the unthinkable. He led a unanimous vote in Iran's parliament to nationalize the oil industry. For the first time in 50 years, Iran took control of its own oil. It was a moment of incredible national pride. But for the British, this was an act of war.
Britain was absolutely furious. This wasn't just about money. It was about the survival of an empire that ran on cheap Iranian oil. There was no way they were going to accept this. But their global power was fading after World War II, so they knew they couldn't act alone. So they turned to the world's new superpower, the United States.
The plan had two parts. First, the British Navy blockaded Iran's ports, preventing them from selling their own oil on the world market. This started to just strangle Iran's economy. Second, and much more secretly, Britain's MI6 teamed up with America's brand new CIA. The U.S. was worried that if Mossadegh succeeded, other countries might get the same idea and start nationalizing American-owned assets. So they agreed to help engineer a coup.
The plan was codenamed Operation Ajax, and it was a classic covert operation playbook. Step 1, propaganda. The CIA spent millions to paint Mossadegh, who was a fierce nationalist, as a communist sympathizer to play on Cold War fears. Step 2, chaos. The agency literally hired mobs and paid protesters to flood the streets of Tehran, to make it look like the government was losing control. And the final step, military force. Activating bribed commanders to storm Mossadegh's home and seize power.
After a failed first attempt, the plan worked. On August 19, 1953, Mossadegh's home was shelled by Kanks, he was arrested, and Iran's brief, hopeful democratic experiment was crushed. The Shah, who had fled the country in fear, was flown back and reinstalled on the throne, not as a constitutional monarch, but as an absolute ruler, backed by American power.
And this is the crucial part. The overthrow of Mossadegh didn't just end a government. It fundamentally changed the course of Iranian history. It planted the seeds of a deep bitterness and mistrust towards the West, and particularly towards the United States. This coup became the unhealed wound in the nation's psyche.
And what happened to the oil? Well, the very next year, a new deal was signed. As you can see, Britain's old monopoly was broken. But American oil companies, who had zero stake before the coup, were suddenly handed a massive 40% share. For Iranians, the message was crystal clear. Their democracy was destroyed so that foreign companies could take their oil.
In his trial, Mossadegh understood perfectly what had happened. He knew his only sin was standing up for his country's independence, and that he was being punished to send a message to any other nation that might dare to do the same.
And this brings us right back to our original question. When those students in 1979 demanded an apology, this is what they were talking about. For President Carter, the 1953 coup was ancient times, ancient history. But for millions of Iranians, it was the original sin, the moment America stole their democracy and their future. It was a national trauma that directly fueled the anti-American rage of the 1979 Islamic Revolution and has poisoned the relationship ever since.
The story of Mossadegh isn't just about oil or politics. It's a powerful reminder of how a single event, when it's remembered as a deep and unacknowledged injustice, can echo through time, shaping a nation's identity and its actions for generations to come. It leaves us with a vital question. How many of today's conflicts are rooted in a past that one side has forgotten and the other can never forget?